BBC News, Peking.
The Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev has expressed concern and regret at the situation in China and said he hoped the changes in what he called that great country wouldn't fail. Mr. Gorbachev was speaking on the final day of his visit to West Germany, where he also hinted that one day the Berlin Wall would come down.
It was the turn of steel workers in Dortmund today to give Mr. Gorbachev the kind of rapturous welcome he's received everywhere else in Germany this week. His appeal across the whole German social spectrum has been a remarkable aspect of the visit, changing attitudes amongst the peoples of Europe, East and West, Mr. Gorbachev's theme. Earlier at a Bonn news conference, he'd spoken about the Berlin Wall, which he said could come down when the circumstances were right.
The GDR at that time took advantage of its sovereign rights, and that means that the wall could disappear once the conditions that generated the need for it disappear.
Not for the first time this week, the Soviets had hard words for the British government. Mr. Gorbachev said Mrs. Thatcher was eccentric for expelling so-called Soviet spies, but thanked British people for their help after the recent Soviet train disaster.
In the Soviet Union, what I have said, there are things that are just more important, more valuable than suspicions of spying.
Within the last hour, Mr. Gorbachev has flown home from Düsseldorf, leaving behind him plenty for Germany's partners in the Western Alliance to mull over.
In Belfast this morning was probably shot by mistake by one of his colleagues. Adam Gilbert, a Royal Marine from Aldershot, was in a foot patrol which opened fire on a suspicious car. In another incident in West Belfast, a 2-year-old boy was shot during an attack on police. And in County Londonderry, a soldier was seriously injured when a booby-trap bomb exploded under his car.
The soldier who died had only arrived in the province this month. Early today, he was on a foot patrol which opened fire from different angles on a stolen Ford Sierra in the Antrim Road. It appears Marine Gilbert was accidentally shot by one of his colleagues, and he died in hospital a short time later. At first, it was thought he'd been hit in crossfire, but the police now say that no shots came from the car, which was later found abandoned and in flames. Meanwhile, a 2-and-a-half-year-old boy is recovering in hospital tonight after being wounded when gunmen opened fire on a security forces checkpoint in West Belfast. Martin McGeown was in a car with his parents when he was hit by a terrorist bullet. Astonishingly, he escaped with only superficial wounds.
I was sort of deafened by the bang of the bullet, and then Martin was screaming, and I saw the 3 holes in his shirt and realised that he'd been shot in the arm.
And at Coleraine in County Londonderry, an off-duty soldier survived a booby-trap bomb which exploded under his car. He'd been visiting his girlfriend and had just opened the door of the vehicle when the device went off.
It blew the seat up, blew the windscreen out, blew the bonnet clean off the car, and the chap was lying there on the ground.
The soldier suffered severe leg injuries in the explosion. He's said to be seriously ill, though not in danger.
2 bank managers and members of their families were taken hostage by armed robbers in Northamptonshire this morning. The gang later got away with £26,000. The incident began when 4 men forced their way into a bank manager's house at Turweston near Brackley. They tied up 4 members of his family and took his daughter, who works at Barclays Bank in Bloxham, as a hostage. The men then took a second bank manager and his wife hostage before robbing the bank. A reward of £10,000 has been offered.
Police and forensic experts have spent the day searching the comfortable house in the quiet village of Turweston, where local bank manager Terence Ward lived with his family. It was just after midnight that 4 men armed with sawn-off shotguns and wearing balaclava helmets broke in. Mr. Ward, his wife and daughters Angela, who's 18, and Helen, who's 14, were held at gunpoint. Then left bound and gagged while 2 of the gang headed for Barclays Bank in the village of Bloxham, a few miles away, where Angela Ward works. When their first attempt on the bank failed, the gunmen broke into the local bank manager's home nearby, held up him and his wife, left them back with their other hostages and returned with the keys to the safe. This time they also brought Angela Ward, handcuffed and gagged, with them. The gang escaped with more than £26,000. Angela was found by a cleaner several hours later. Police at Banbury, who are coordinating the investigation, say all the hostages suffered bruising, cuts and shock, but are recovering well from their ordeal. Detectives are trying to trace a white Ford Sierra car and a black Golf GTI. They want information from the public, but they warned those who carried out the raid are undoubtedly dangerous.
I think you must accept any team of criminals that go out armed with shotguns and who later produce knives to achieve their aims are dangerous.
A police helicopter has been circling the rural area on the Oxfordshire-Northamptonshire border where the gang struck, but it's feared they had plenty of time to get well away before the raid was even discovered.
5 men have been jailed for a total of 25 years after admitting possessing 10 tons of cannabis with an estimated street value of £18 million. It was British Customs' biggest haul of the drug and was found on a ship sailing from Colombia to Holland. 50 shots were fired by French customs officers before the ship stopped after a chase in the English Channel.
The pound has recovered slightly against a weaker dollar, although at one point today it fell below $1.50 for the first time since January 1987. But it recovered ground to close at $1.52, up half a cent on the day. And there's been another sharp drop in unemployment. The seasonally adjusted figures for those out of work and claiming benefit fell more than 22,000. And figures released today show average earnings are increasing at 9.25% a year, no change from the previous month.
Britain's second largest building society, the Abbey National, has announced the share price for its flotation on the stock exchange next month. A mock house was used to uncover the price, which at £1.30 is at the lower end of city expectations. It's Britain's biggest ever flotation and in effect will turn the Abbey into the country's 5th largest bank.
New, tighter guidelines have been drawn up for police officers who take part in high-speed car chases. So far this year, 20 people have been killed in accidents resulting from police chases. Now, the Association of Chief Police Officers says all policemen involved in accidents will have to be breathalyzed, and officers will be assigned to keep in touch with the families of victims.
This chase is being simulated by the South Wales Police as part of a training programme, but it happens for real every day in every force in Britain.
The vehicle has 3 occupants, driving at high speed, indicating that he doesn't wish to stop at this time.
Pursuing suspects driving erratically and at high speed is dangerous for everyone caught up in them. The number of deaths caused this year is already well up on last. None involved drinking by policemen, but senior officers believe the public have to be reassured.
It's important that people should see that we are doing things fairly. And it's important, I think, as far as the fairness is concerned, that police officers involved in accidents, like everybody else, is breathalyzed. If there's an allegation that the policeman has been drinking, sometimes that's true. He needs to be dealt with as severely as anybody else.
The police officers that I represent will have nothing at all to fear from this, because they are responsible officers. The idea that they will have a heavy drinking session before coming on duty doesn't even enter into consideration for the vast majority.
Every force will have officers whose job is to keep in touch with families who've had relatives killed or badly hurt in car chases. The South Wales force uses video simulation to train its drivers and radio controllers back at base. Controllers should take charge as quickly as possible, calling in helicopters where they can as the safest means of pursuit. On the ground, only drivers who've been specially trained should take part. They and the controllers should call off the hunt if the risks are too great. Police emphasise none of this will stop them doing their duty. A terrorist or abducted child may be in the car being pursued, but the chase has to be carried out in proper, controlled conditions.
Later in the programme, a scientific dream is shattered. British scientists say the claims about cold fusion are false. And why equal pay could cost the electricity industry millions of pounds. Now the time is 6:17.
The Headlines tonight: 3 workers in Shanghai have been sentenced to death for rioting. They were protesting about government action against students in Peking. President Gorbachev, on the last day of his West German visit, has said that if reform in China fails, efforts to reduce world tension would be undermined. Police in Belfast say a Royal Marine who died this morning was probably shot accidentally by one of his colleagues. Britain's leading atomic scientists have poured cold water on the idea of cold fusion. A few months ago, a team in America claimed it had realized the scientific dream of creating endless energy from atomic fusion in a test tube. But now the British scientists who've carried out the most extensive tests so far say there's no evidence that cold fusion works.
It all looked so promising, the prospect of cheap, unlimited energy using just simple equipment. Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons had claimed that the nuclear fusion processes which power the sun could be reproduced in a test tube. They passed an electric current through a special type of water. Atoms of the gas given off fused, producing heat and neutron radiation. Laboratories round the world rushed to duplicate the experiment, and some claimed they'd got similar results. The Atomic Energy Research Establishment at Harwell pulled out all the stops and began what they believe was the world's largest cold fusion research project. The project has cost Harwell £250,000. They've been at it flat out for 3 months, night and day and weekends, and still have found absolutely nothing. So how thorough were they?
We've used 3 different types of heat flow instrument. We've used all sorts of different types of neutron counters. We've done the thing upside down, inside out. We've changed the solution. We've checked, calibrated, everything. We've done it very thoroughly indeed.
So how disappointed are you?
Oh, very disappointed. This would have been a very significant discovery, and we're very sad that we've put all this effort in and failed to find anything.
Despite Harwell's verdict, Professor Fleischmann still maintains he is right.
I'm quite confident that the observations which we have made cannot be explained by